So, how do you record when pretty much every single product that you use on your channel has been canceled? Okay. Hey guys. Today is one of those days where I'm not really going to be going into educational content. I just have some things weighing on me that I really feel I need to get off my chest in some way, and I figured the best possible way I can probably do this is through a video. Now, before I get into it, I want to make abundantly clear that everything that I'll be talking about is just my own personal feelings and observations. It is not in reference to any of the products that I'm using or the people behind it or the companies behind it. It's just me venting how I've been feeling, and these products happen to be the ones that work the best on these cosmetic practice heads. If you are new to my channel and have not been watching me since the inception of it in December, you probably will not have seen me struggle and struggle and struggle to find products and methodologies and all of that kind of stuff to get anything to work on these cosmetic practice heads. Now, granted, a lot of that is probably because I'm a novice. I'm not a makeup artist at all. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be something I'm not. I've never gone to school for it. I just enjoy working with it and using these cosmetic practice heads to do it. I also want to say the complexion of this head also does not in any way, make, shape, or form have anything to do with the subject I'm talking about today. It was literally the last one I had clean. It's not that deep, so I want to defray that as well. And it's taken me a long time and quite a bit of money to try to find any sort of products that work with these heads, because they are very difficult. You know, a lot of cosmetics that people have said, oh, this is a great company, this is a great product, and all that kind of stuff, they don't work on these heads. The heads, I believe they're made of silicone, I think. They don't have human pores or texture, anything really to grip onto the cosmetics, so finding things that will adhere to the heads has been a very difficult process. Even brands that are widely used all over YouTube and social media platforms by makeup enthusiasts and makeup artists don't work on these frickin' heads. So I just wanted to give that kind of disclaimer. As always, I prep the head with hairspray per the instructions. I put on a layer of Wonder Beauty Glow Ahead Illuminating Face Oil. I got this from a BoxyCharm. Then I did LA Girl Pro Coverage HD Foundation in the color Toast, which I'm almost out of. So if anybody knows where to get this, I would be greatly appreciative, because they didn't have it at Ulta. I don't know, they didn't have it online anyway. I'm struggling finding it, and this is the best match for this head that I've experienced. But anyway, after that I put down Ciate London setting powder, and this is NYX eyeshadow base in the color White. Which is ironic because I have many NYX eyeshadow palettes, and I have not been able to get them to work on these heads. I will try again in probably a week or two, but for tonight I just wanted to pull out things that I know are gonna work, even if it turns out like crap, which it may very well. And I know I'm rambling. It's one of those types of videos. This is not an educational night at all. This is just me letting things out. If you are curious about what I'm using, which is why I'm going over this, I did spray it with setting spray, which was probably my fault because the wetness of the setting spray got down and through to the hairspray in some areas, so now it's splotchy. The head is imperfect, as is my subject today, so it's whatever. This was part of an Ulta box that I got at the holidays. It's no longer available. If you haven't had your head buried in the sand in any way, make, shape, or form, Bloodlust palette from Jeffree Star. And I have She's Got Solstice and All Things Equinox from ColourPop. Literally the only brand of actual cosmetics I'm about to apply that aren't Cancel are Ulta Beauty. So I'm just going to try to get right into it, and forgive me, I am probably going to stumble and fumble over this subject matter because I do not have a script prepared at all. This is just basically me trying to get out what I've been really feeling lately, with everything going on in the world. So if you're here for educational content, this isn't the night and you may not like this video. So I've made other videos kind of on this subject matter already about cancel culture and, you know, not just cancel culture as it is, but crying wolf and doing all of these things at every little thing. I'll link them all in this video. I don't have that many of them, but primarily my video today is mostly about cancel culture. And is it really that helpful or beneficial, or is it largely just a toxic thing? And over the past several weeks, as I have been advocating, as many have been advocating for the Black Lives Matter movement, for equality and equal rights, something that I've been passionate about since I was a little kid. And meaning I've even picked up the mantle when it came to marriage equality, and I mean, you name it, I've picked up allyship mantle along the way, trying to help in any way, make, shape, or form that I could, try to help make the world a better place, even with my very tiny voice. But one thing that I'm seeing lately is a lot of the time society has gone from a holding people accountable mentality to immediately canceling somebody, even if that person hasn't had repeated offenses or things of that nature. Not that long ago, before George Floyd died, there was literally a period of like a week where different celebrities were each being canceled for some stupid, dumbass thing that they did in their past. Let's just call a spade a spade. They did dumb shit. They put it in a place where it was somewhat visible. And it came up later at a time where that behavior is no longer acceptable. And I know a lot of people get sick and tired of the phrase, "it was a different time." Forgive the background noise. But for lack of a better way to put it, it really was a different time. You would be shocked at how much the world can change, both in everyday things to everyday mentality, in the span of 10 years, or 20 years, or 30 years. I mean, I look back at some of the things that I watched as a kid, and I loved watching them. I mean, especially for those who are new, I'm somebody who is a musician, and I love things like Broadway musicals and musical plays and things of that nature. So I grew up watching older movies and things that I absolutely love that at the time you wouldn't have necessarily seen a problem with it if you didn't have really much experience outside of your own bubble. And from a young age, I mean, what do you really know beyond your parents? If you're going to school, your immediate friends, and your family. You don't really have worldly experience, or at least wise you didn't when I was a kid, before the internet was massively popular, like it is for today's generations. And yes, I am going to sound very old, and that's okay, but the world has changed a lot from the time that I was a kid to today. I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't even have cell phones. Today, I would challenge any younger person to go ahead and try to use a rotary phone. Because even when I was growing up, even though they had pretty much fallen by the wayside in popularity for touch tone phones, where you press the buttons. My grandmother had a rotary phone because she absolutely hated touch tones. So I know how to use a rotary phone. When I was a kid, we had things like payphones because you didn't have cell phones. If you broke down at the side of the road, you would hope that somebody would go get help for you or make a phone call for you. And I am talking about, not even that long ago. I am not that old. I'm 37. I'm talking about the early 1980s, and I was born right before these technological advances really started coming into play. For the longest time, I used at home, and you can probably Google this computer. I think it was one of the first household home computers, an old Microsoft Apple IIe computer with actual floppy disks. And for those who have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, some of you may know the 3.5 floppy disks that are rigid. Some of you may not even know what that is. But when I say I had an old computer that took 5-inch floppy disks, I mean they literally, you could go like this and they would wiggle. They were flexible. And you had to put them in a very wide slot, and you had to turn a thing so it held it in, and you would wait for the program to load on the computer. That was how I started off on computers. and things that were okay in society back then are immediate cause for canceling today. As I said, I used to enjoy old movies and musicals. Some of the movies that I absolutely loved, God, I can't even remember her name now. Just one, Shirley Temple movies. And I used to absolutely adore the older musicals, such as Calamity Jane or Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and all of these things, where in today's society, if you went back and looked at them, you'd have big problems, for good reason, with them. In many of the Shirley Temple movies, there was, even if it wasn't overt racism, it was there. I mean, with the positions that people in the black community held in the movies, from even the subject matter sometimes was just outwardly racist. Let's call a spade a spade. I look at Calamity Jane, that I absolutely love the music from. And I love Doris Day, and I love the actors from that movie. And I rewatched it recently, and I cringed so hard. I cringed so hard. And believe me, I'm going through all of this for a reason. Because as a kid, I was completely blind to how they portrayed Native Americans. And that some of the things that they were saying, or some of the ways that they were referring to them, were completely inappropriate and wrong. But back during that time, these were things that were acceptable to say. And, you know, I look at how much society has come in the last several years with social justice issues and things of that nature. And I'm happy to see the way that society is changing and becoming more aware and open and informed about, you know, their fellow man and how unfairly they are treated. Not just by the government, but by extension, us as well. Because they are in minority groups. And it's not right, and it's not okay. It's not. And there comes a time in society where you have to say, you know, this has to change, and these circumstances need to change to make society better for everyone, not just those in the majority. And one of the advocates that I absolutely adore, her name is Jane Elliott. Jane? I'll put her name on the screen just in case I'm wrong. I think it's Jane. But she has gone around and spoken about racism and the effects of racism, and how even people who are white, while not thinking about it every day because it doesn't affect us because of our privilege, are in some ways aware of how unfairly people in minority groups are treated. And I love her. I love her interviews. I'll sit there and watch them for hours and just cheer, because everything she's saying is 100% absolutely true. And she has had many times in her lectures or when she's been asked to speak at a collegiate level, I'm just doing a sort of avant-garde look. We'll see if it actually works out the way I'm envisioning it. Where she has asked people in the audience, where it's like, as a white person, for all the white people sitting in the audience, would you like to, if you would like to be treated how society treats African Americans or people in the black community, stand up. And nobody stands up. She's like, see, that means you're aware of the issue and haven't done anything about it. When I was a kid, we didn't have somebody like that. I mean, we had some people, and even in history books, they spoke a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, but there were many black figureheads who weren't spoken about much. We heard about Rosa Parks. But, you know, there was a lot lacking for the education that we got when I was a kid, that many people have at their hands today. And unless you knew what to look for and where to look for it, you had no idea. None. Our history in the world is written by the victors, not by the victims. And I can't tell you how often I've sat here and I've been watching them tear down these statues and bring down the Confederate flags and all of these kinds of things, which, fine, do all of that, but don't destroy it. And I know what I'm saying right now may not be a popular opinion, but please hear me out as to why I'm saying that. Especially for those who are new to my channel and haven't watched my content talking about the historical evolution of world religion. There was a point where I was trying to talk about Middle Eastern shamanism. And I wasn't able to find much information. And the reason for that is because Middle Eastern shamanism happened in the area where Christianity came into being. And unfortunately, an aspect of new religions or invading people, or, you know, when somebody goes from being the minority to the majority, is they have the prolific tendency to destroy the things from the past. So when I wanted to speak about Middle Eastern shamanism, I was kind of screwed because there wasn't much information to find, because it had largely been destroyed by the Catholic Church because they wanted to erase that part of history and that information and try to make it so that it never existed. And a lot of the arguments that I'm seeing today with regards to taking down the statues and destroying them and all of that is, well, history is preserved in literature. We don't need these things anymore. But when the Christian church started coming into being, And I mean Christianity as a whole. I'm not talking about Catholicism or Protestant or any of these things. They're all of the same cloak. Even when Judaism rather, started to come into popularity, as it were, as a world religion, you know, these were societies that had books. Maybe not as we know them, but they had paper and they had all of these things and wrote things down, and they all got destroyed. And I know that the World Wide Web is a much bigger thing today, and it's a lot harder to get rid of things on the internet, but you never know what somebody's going to invent, or some methodology that the government's all of a sudden going to say, we are not going to allow you access to this information anymore, and because of that, we are going to burn all the books, or we are going to eradicate or erase any part of or historical reference to this thing that we don't want to really talk about and we don't really want present in our today's society. So, especially with the way we've been seeing government acting out of bounds lately. I'm not saying this is going to happen. But when I look at these remnants of a time or people who are now deemed evil when back then they were celebrated as heroes, I would personally rather see them go up in some sort of museum or something of that nature, of showing how times have changed and how information and the world society has shifted. I mean, you can call it Museum of Evil People Once Deemed Heroes for all I care, but you know, they're relics of our history, and I have been a big proponent on my own channel that those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it, and we're seeing that with the pandemic right now. We're seeing that in society with, you know, we had the civil rights movement, we have had countless calls for reform and change to happen from not just societal level, but government level as well. And then I look at a lot of the politicians who are presently in office, and if you have not seen the photo of the Democrats in the kente cloth taking a knee for George Floyd, I have a lot of issues with that. I have a lot of issues with that sentiment, mainly because I ask you all not to blindly vote. And yes, I absolutely agree, the present Republican in office needs to go. They need to go, period. That's my opinion. You may not agree, that's okay. But a lot of the people who were taking knees in that photo, they were in office when a lot of these hidden racist policies became law. These are people who may have even voted for them. So it's important to really scrutinize the voting records of people. Because here's one major, sorry about the background noise, busy street. Here's one thing that is a major problem in our government. You have governmental people having hidden agendas or things that they want passed, and they slip them into bills so that bills become thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pages thick, to the point where nobody's gonna frickin' read it. They want the basic gist summary. They decide, sure, I'll vote for it, sure, I won't, or no, I won't. So a lot of those hidden things get missed. And those that aren't signed into law through the system of the Senate and the Congress and that we have in place often get signed in via executive order, just with one piece of paper, bypassing the process and saying this is how I want it to be, which we've been seeing a lot of. This isn't coming out quite how I wanted it to. I'm just trying to do something with it, and basically I'm just coloring while talking. But, and forgive me, I went off subject. But back to what I was saying, a lot of the things that used to be recognized and that used to be okay are no longer okay. When I was a kid, we did not learn in history about the abhorrent cruelty of Christopher Columbus. We didn't learn it. I'm 37, that wasn't that long ago. We learned that he discovered America. We learned that he was a hero. We learned that because of him, we now have the United States, which is to explain to you why he has his own frickin' holiday. I know some people who are in a much younger generation than mine today were like, well, why does he have a holiday? Well, it was just for existing. Well, no, because this is what we were taught. That he discovered America. And had he not done it, we wouldn't have known where to go when we were escaping the Brits. That's how it goes. Now, as time progressed, we learned about Leif Erikson, and we learned about other explorers who had stumbled upon this land before Christopher Columbus, but they don't have their own holiday because they weren't the ones lifted up to being the heroes who found the land. You know, it's one of those things where so many people scream about giving credit to where credit is due. Well, credit was never given to where credit was due back then. It was whomever was popular and whomever had the loudest support. History, including the history that I personally learned, was never accurate. It was never accurate because it was written by the victors of war and of conquering new lands. The history books that I studied were written by white men celebrating white men. Now, Christopher Columbus wasn't white, if I recall. I believe he was Spanish. I may be wrong with that. If I am, I'll put it somewhere in here. But, you know, I look at Christianity today, and they largely portray Jesus Christ as being white, and he wasn't. He was Middle Eastern. A lot of the people who are celebrated as the heroes today are portrayed as white people, even if they weren't. I mean, hell, you can watch a Disney movie, Pocahontas. Look how she was portrayed to us growing up. A lot of people, if they didn't study beyond that Disney movie, took that Disney movie for being accurate. And it's not by any means or measure. And what happened to her was awful. How she was torn away from her family and the people that she loved and forced to go to England. But these are the things that we weren't taught when I was a kid. We knew only what was presented to us. And if we found a subject particularly interesting, we might go research it further in the library, but most of the time, history wasn't one of those subjects. And when we were assigned things from history, it wasn't like world matters. It was things that you didn't really care about, like and I'm saying about back then, you were like, why am I studying the Civil War? It was so long ago, it doesn't matter anymore. You know, the mentality of kids that you have when they present you information, and it's just like, things changed, everything's fine, we don't need to learn this anymore. But now here we are today fighting for the same things, and you look back at the Civil War and say, this is why it's important to learn where it started and how we ended up to where we are today. I didn't appreciate that as a kid. I didn't. I hated history. History was one of the subjects that I absolutely hated. I'm not gonna lie. I hated history. I didn't see the point. I didn't see why it mattered or anything of that nature, and I know I wasn't alone in that sentiment. And it's because of that I see what's going on in the world today with people being destructive of these monuments. Knowing that when you don't preserve even some, not all, but some of the history that we now know better, even if it's something that, you know, we look at it and we're like, we don't need this. Well, you never know if you're going to need something like that monument in the future. We don't know how the history books are going to be portrayed for future generations. As it is, I know a lot of present day generations are not being taught about World War II in school. It was too long ago. Doesn't matter anymore. Nothing before, I think it's Vietnam War. That's a tragedy. That's an absolute tragedy. World War I and World War II were within the last century. And the sins of what happened back then are very much as relevant today as they were back then. Because if we don't keep an eye on society and what's happening around us and what is our government pulling and what is going on behind closed doors with special favors and whispers and hidden agendas and all of that kind of stuff, that is how our government ends up getting way, way, way more power than they should be having per our Constitution. that is how we end up in a mess like we currently have. Because government was pulling all this hidden stuff behind closed doors. They were adding bills to things they wanted passed, and a lot of the time our government, as much as we love to look at it as a two-party system, it's a one-party system. They just pretend to be two parties. They're two sides of the same coin. They really are. Quite frankly, I think we absolutely need to get rid of the party system altogether. Because we have been dealing with this bullshit divisiveness for far too long. And the reason why I say that is because when you see Democrat and Republican, you think that they're two different groups. You think that this side is on this side and this side is on this side. Well, far more often than not, people are not this or that. More often, and the greater populace is somewhere in between those two extremes. And even when they present themselves one way, if you look at their voting history and you look at the things that they used to support, when Obama got voted in as president in his first term, I did not want him to be president. Not because of the color of his skin, but because the man was an anti-LGBT community. Openly. And I know that's not going to fall in line with the popular opinion of him. And yes, he did come around in his second term, and I'm glad he did. But in that first term, I was livid at the man because he would not support marriage equality. Absolutely livid at him. But in those first 4 years, it was not that popular to be pro-marriage equality, and he wouldn't have been elected. So, he said what he needed to do. He did what he needed to do. He put in, small things here and there. And in his second 4 years, he enacted marriage equality. He, or supported it, I should say. He didn't necessarily, I don't remember when it was signed. Yeah, I think it was in his last years as president. Signed into law. I mean, I look, and so far more often than not, what people have not realized, at least in the last sitting presidents that I've seen, every single one of those presidents was hated. They were absolutely hated. Now, we may look back at Obama and largely people are supportive of him and what he did during his tenure. But at the beginning, he was hated. And people still hated him throughout his tenure as president. And I look at the past few presidents, and every single one of them had a vice president that people hated worse than the president. The vice president position has no longer become a backup plan in case something happens to the presidents who are not well received. It has become a position of ensuring the life of the president. And not many people have come to that realization. I look at George W. Bush. He had Dick Cheney as his vice president. People hated George W. Bush. He did not get voted in by the popular vote, much like Trump didn't. Al Gore got voted the popular vote, and the Electoral College voted in George W. Bush anyway. Trump is not the first person to have that happen, and he's Not even the second. There's been many presidents where that's happened. This is why I keep saying the Electoral College, it does what it wants. It's led by old, fat, white people, by and large, who are wealthy and affluent and pulling strings behind the scenes. And I know that makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, and that's fine. You can think of me whatever you wish. But when you open your eyes and you start doing research and start really paying attention to everything going on, you would be surprised what you find out. And it's because of these things, and it's because of these events and these things that I've researched through history from my own channel and even of my own interest, that I see why it's so important not just to preserve the good, but the bad as well. And that includes, I'm not saying have them out in society, don't get it twisted, but to preserve some historical remnant of the Confederate flag or statues of Christopher Columbus or all of these evil, evil people as we've come to know them for slave trade and horrible, atrocious acts on humanity. That people may not have been as aware of had that historical knowledge been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation in these minority groups. Like I said, 30 years ago, Christopher Columbus was a hero. If the indigenous people hadn't maintained a record of that history of the atrocities that he did and help spread and disseminate that information, we would still be worshiping him as the man who discovered America and all of these things. Which is why it's important to preserve the bad as well as the good. I'm not saying the statues or the flag should fly or the statue should still remain up. I'm not saying that by any means. But I am saying don't completely destroy it, because that can have the same effect as what Christianity did, or it may have even been Judaism, or both of them, because I've come to find out that they often work hand in hand. Together destroyed an entire set of American world spirituality. Very little was preserved of Middle Eastern shamanism. My video, I think that night was like 15 minutes long, because I reached that point where I said that there might be a subject matter or two along the way that I might not be able to report on to the fullest extent, because things will have gotten erased or destroyed in history. And unfortunately, the spread of Christianity did a lot of that. I mean, how many, not just spread of Christianity, but even world expanse, and go away, you stupid, annoying motorcycle. You done? Thank you. Sort of. Where the spread of humanity. How many small tribal communities have been eradicated or absorbed into bigger tribal communities and had either their traditions or belief systems completely wiped out and replaced with something else, or their traditions and the belief systems also appropriated into that major group as a way of saying, hey, see, we're not so different. Why don't you come with us? It has happened time after time after time after time throughout human history. And being mindful of not just the good things, but the horrors and the atrocities as well is a very important thing to preserve. Otherwise, we'll never, as a society, stop repeating things. Because without that historical information and that reference point to say, see, this happened before, let's not do this again, people won't know. I mean, I look at my video on COVID-19 where I went through comparing what happened in 1918 and why it was so important to what was happened today with coronavirus. And why that reference point is so important. That happened 102 years ago. And everything I said that could and would happen in that video, because of what happened historically as a reference point, has already started to happen. And believe it or not, I'm not celebrating that. Anytime I make these either educated or intuitive predictions that are less than happy, I don't want them to come true. I actually welcome and hope that the universe proves me wrong. Because I would rather, much rather, have people think me completely and utterly crazy and not know what I'm talking about, and have the things that I've said were going to happen not come to fruition in an effort to keep people safe and preserve life, than to be proven right and gain followers that I would rather be wrong than right, especially about this. And more than all of this, what I was talking about, preserving history and all of that, I also wanted to, I know I went off on a tangent about all of that, and I didn't finish talking about what I was talking about, cancel culture. There is not one single person alive today, outside of maybe infants, who haven't had the chance to screw up in some way yet. Who hasn't made some mistakes. There isn't anyone. Not a single person. I mean, there are people that I follow today. I mean, Will Spill. That's what he, oh my God, expose you on Twitter. When I first started following the drama community and everything, he was problematic as hell. As an example. But he changed. And every day I'm really proud of that kid. And he's grown a lot in the short time that I knew of his existence. I mean, didn't really follow a lot of the drama channels or anything of that nature. God, when did I start following all that? It's been less than a year. Next month will be a year. I didn't really follow YouTube drama. I didn't really follow anything that happened. So there's still things that I'm finding out about now that happened in the past that I had no clue about because I wasn't following this group of people, I guess you could say. I wasn't really following YouTube. I wasn't really following, I didn't even know who Jeffree Star was. I wasn't really interested in, like, Entertainment Tonight and all of those kinds of things. I looked at them it's like tabloid TV, and I didn't really find them interesting. No idea who these people were at all. But there's one thing that I'm seeing a lot lately that has really started to bother me. And it's that immediate knee-jerk reaction of immediately canceling somebody for mistakes that they've made. Like, that's it. You're done. Out of here. Gone. Bye. We hope to completely and totally destroy your life because of this thing that you did. That was unacceptable. That wasn't unacceptable when they frickin' did it. Like Jimmy Fallon. I'm looking at even, things that were not called out when people did these stupid things. You can look at old movies, you can look at even one that was made in the 1980s, Trading Places. There was blackface in that. Dan Aykroyd did blackface in Trading Places. It's a wonderful movie, and it makes a very good point. And when it was portrayed in the movie, they were trying to keep him undercover so that he wouldn't be noticed for what they were doing. If you haven't seen the movie, I do recommend it. It is a good movie. And it is one that still holds a lot of real world meaning, because a lot of the things that happen in that movie are things that I would not be surprised if our own government was pulling behind the scenes over stupid, shady shit. So I look at blackface, that was not called out, and you saw it in entertainment, from old movies to even more recent ones like Trading Places. And people didn't say, hey, that's culturally insensitive, that's wrong. I don't know how long it was ago that Justin Trudeau had done it or anything of that nature. My only point is that it wasn't always condemned like it is now, rightfully so. But it is a different time and a different mentality of when it happened. I'm not saying don't hold people accountable for those actions. Sure, go right ahead and hold them accountable. But when I say that you are not going to encourage somebody to change by immediately canceling them, by immediately writing them off, by attacking them every single day on social media, which is something I see all the time, by doing all of these things, you're not going to get them to change. You're just going to make them put their back up and get defensive and either just not be as obvious about it and hide it behind closed doors, or just block you and ignore you and move on with life. They're not going to listen. Psychologists have largely talked about the effects of negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement a lot, to the point where more and more parents today are using far more positive reinforcement to correct their children and their behavior versus negative reinforcement, like spanking or slapping or all that kind of neat thing. I can speak from my own experience that when I was at a friend's house once, I saw negative reinforcement being done, and you could see that the child was feeling very demonized by it, and I could see their presence going from being this bright, bubbly, cheerful kid to all of a sudden very small and closed in and sad and like nothing that they were doing, even though I saw them trying to do it, was good enough. And as somebody who has grown up and lived in the reality of that kind of mentality and that kind of enforcement every single day, it really does affect your mental health. When I saw this, I immediately stepped in and I started using positive reinforcement. And I noticed that the one thing that was kind of like the obstacle is the child was interested in the program that was on TV. And the other person was trying to force them to do what they wanted them to do right in that moment, right when they wanted them to do it. And I took the stance of, go ahead and watch your program, and at the advertisements, we'll just take that advertisement, small 5-minute period of time to straighten up and clean things up. The other person went away, and I was using that technique. And even though the child still looked absolutely devastated and hurt from what the other person was saying and doing, he responded better to that positive reinforcement of, instead of attacking them and pointing out the things that they shouldn't be doing or they're not doing it fast enough or on your timeline, by showing them respect and saying, I'm cognizant and mindful of the fact that you were in the middle of a program and watching that, and I'm going to respect that. So go ahead and watch your program. And during those 5 minutes, that's when we'll clean up, and when your program comes back, you can sit back down and watch it again. And it worked. It got cleaned up. He seemed to be doing a little bit better by the end of it. But it's these kinds of things that I even look at modern day society and I see, oh, well, this person or this company or this group isn't doing what I'd like them to do, so therefore they are automatically canceled. That doesn't really get them to do anything, but roll their eyes at you and keep doing what they're doing, even if it's problematic or bad behavior. What we need to, as a society, stop doing is arbitrarily throwing people away when they do something wrong, even if it happens more than once. Because that doesn't teach them anything. It doesn't. You call out the behavior that you don't like without attacking. You call out what they're doing or have done that you have an issue with. if things happened in the past, it is important in some way to keep mindful that people used to do stupid shit. I'm not saying it was good at all in any way, make, shape, or form. And during that entire time of when it was very much shock value in the media and all of that kind of stuff, I did not in any way, make, shape, or form partake in it at all, because I didn't care for it. I didn't like it. I thought it was ridiculous and stupid and insensitive to do. But I also know that, yeah, that was an absolute part of culture for a while. Absolutely. Our values as society are changing and evolving, and that's a good thing. And I celebrate it. But collectively, as a whole, you know, that old adage of you get more with sugar than you do with vinegar. You can say, hey, I really like this aspect of you, but I really wish you would address this. That comes off differently as, I hate you, you're canceled, you're stupid, you know, you're this, you're that, you're evil, you're maniacal. That doesn't do anything to get them to change or address what they did that you didn't like. So I'm glad that we as a society are evolving and have this mentality of unifying and fighting for equality for everyone and getting rid of laws and traditions that we've come to realize are not good. I'm happy about that. But the way we're going about it to get people to change, it isn't going to work. And I know a lot of the people who are doing these things are coming from a well-meaning place. And I know that they are upset and they are angry and they are hurting for themselves or for others because of these things. I fully understand that, and I recognize it, and I respect it. But anger isn't going to cause anything but more pain. And I'm not saying put your anger aside and don't be angry. I'm just saying address it maybe a little bit differently than through attacks. Because people are only going to listen to you and they're only going to hear what you have to say if you speak to them as human beings and with respect. Versus like they're garbage. No one responds well to being talked to like that. I'm talking from personal experience here. So I'm sorry this was a really long video and a lot longer than I expected and all of that. It was just the past couple of weeks, and understandably because we're all angry and we're all hurting and we're all upset, justifiably, at everything that has been going on, either undercover or in front of our eyes, recorded on a phone. We're all fighting the same battle against police brutality, against racism, against all of these issues that for quite some time we all thought were largely taken care of, and come to realize, and now that people have really started listening and paying attention to the Black community and the POC community, we're starting to see, yeah, they're not entirely wrong. They've been trying to get our attention for a long time, and nothing's been working. So there comes a point that you have to say, you know what? It's time to rise up and it's time to fight. Because if they're not going to listen to this quiet protest, they're going to have to pay attention to the loud one. So, even with coronavirus, I'm glad people are fighting. I just really wish it were at a time when we didn't have a pandemic. I really do. I'm not gonna lie, because I know with this pandemic and with the virus and everything, the second wave is happening now, not in 3 months, 4 months, and hopefully never. It's happening now. So as always, from the bottom of my heart, please keep wearing your masks, keep washing your hands, keep being extra vigilant in this fight against coronavirus. While you fight for your fellow man. And remember, it is not the station a person holds that is a true measure of who they are. But the content of their character and their heart and soul matters far more than what they have in their wallet or the position they hold in a company or government. And if you see these people talking out both sides of their mouths or taking a knee when they voted in these laws to oppress minority groups, well, I hope you know what to do come November. Do your research. And with all of that, I wish you the brightest of blessings, protection, good health, healing, and most of all, blessed be.